Dominic Vale believed his ex-wife had aborted their baby and vanished without remorse. 6 years later, beneath the gold-lit ceiling of a private Chicago chapel, a little boy walked into Dominic's wedding, looked straight at the most feared man in the room, and called him Papa. The music stopped, his bride turned pale, and the woman Dominic had spent years trying to hate stood in the doorway, holding the truth he thought had been buried. Some wounds do not disappear. They wait behind locked doors, forged signatures, and the silence of people we once trusted. This story is not only about a mafia boss finding his son. It is about betrayal, second chances, and whether love can survive after fear has shaped every choice. Stay until the end, because one child is about to uncover a lie powerful families killed to protect. Like the video and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. 3 days earlier, Dominic Vale had never heard a child call him Papa. He had not seen Evelyn Carter in 6 years. He had not allowed anyone to say her name in his house, and he had spent so long turning grief into discipline that most people in Chicago believed he had been born without a soft place in him. On Tuesday afternoon, he arrived at the Harbor Street Children's Arts Center in Pilsen, wearing a black suit that made the painted hallway look brighter than it was. The former church was crowded with clay animals, jars of brushes, and sheets of construction paper. Children ran between rooms with wet paint on their hands. Somewhere upstairs, a piano teacher repeated the same 4 notes. Dominic did not belong in places that sounded like this. Eli Rourke walked beside him, broad-shouldered and calm, scanning doors and windows while pretending to study a wall covered in crooked self-portraits. 4 security men followed at a careful distance. Their suits were plain, their movements were not. The director, Margaret Bell, hurried forward and thanked him for funding the new studio. A photographer waited beside a brass plaque bearing the name of the Vale Foundation. Dominic had agreed to one photograph because Vivian wanted a softer public image before the wedding. He took 2 steps toward the plaque. A blue paper glider struck him in the chest. It bounced off his lapel and landed near his right shoe. Every adult in the hallway froze. One of Dominic's men moved immediately. A small boy appeared from behind a column and ran toward them in green dinosaur sneakers. His dark hair was too long over his forehead. A strip of tape clung to one sleeve of his gray sweater. He stopped when the guard stepped between him and the paper glider. "That is mine," the boy said. The guard did not move. "Stay back." The boy looked around the man's legs and frowned at Dominic. "You are standing on the runway." The guard glanced at Eli. Eli looked at Dominic. Dominic lowered his gaze to the paper glider. One wing was bent. A star had been drawn on the side in blue crayon along with 2 uneven windows and the name Bluebird written in large block letters. He picked it up. The boy gasped. "Careful." Dominic turned the glider in his hand. "You threw it at me. I launched it. You walked into the sky." A volunteer near the paint room covered her mouth. Dominic looked at the boy. The child looked back without fear. "Your aircraft has a weak left wing," Dominic said. "It did not until your chest attacked it. My chest was standing still. That makes it suspicious." For 1 second, nothing changed in Dominic's face. Then the corner of his mouth moved. The boy noticed. "There. You did it." Dominic's expression returned to stillness. "Did what a weather break?" The boy stepped around the guard. This time Dominic lifted one hand before the man could stop him. The guard moved aside. The boy approached until only a few feet separated them. He pointed toward Dominic's forehead. "You have storm eyebrows. I have what storm eyebrows. They make people think thunder is coming. You have to take a weather break before talking to kids." Dominic glanced at Eli. Eli studied the ceiling. "What does a weather break require?" Dominic asked. "You stop looking angry for 5 seconds. I am not angry. That is what angry people always say." Dominic crouched slowly, bringing himself closer to the child's height. The movement caused a second silence in the hallway. Men like Dominic did not kneel. Not in church, not in court, not in front of enemies. Yet there he was, one knee near a smear of yellow paint, holding a damaged paper glider as if it mattered. "What is your name?" he asked. "Mason Carter." "How old are you, Mason Carter?" 6 years and 10 months. 10 months, Mason nodded gravely. "People say 6 like the months do not count." "That is almost stealing." Dominic examined the bent wing again. "You believe 10 months makes a difference. It makes almost a year." "That is true." Mason leaned closer. You look like you know about falling. The words landed before Dominic could prepare for them. He looked at the child's face more carefully. Dark eyes, strong brows, a small crease beside the mouth when he concentrated. Something moved beneath Dominic's ribs, old and unwelcome. I know what happens when people do not pay attention, he said. That is why Bluebird crashed. You threw him too hard. Mason looked offended. Bluebird is a she. My mistake. You have to apologize. Dominic held the glider in both hands. My apologies, Bluebird. Mason considered the sincerity of this. Acceptable. Dominic adjusted the fold, pressed the crease with his thumb, and returned the glider. Mason took it carefully. You fixed it. For now. Do you know airplanes, number? Then how did you do that? Dominic looked at the repaired wing. I know how to notice where something broke. Mason's expression softened. That is almost the same thing. Margaret quietly signaled for the photographer to lower the camera. Mason raised 3 fingers. There are rules if you want to be my friend. Dominic's eyebrows lifted. I did not ask to be your friend. You fixed Bluebird. That starts the paperwork. What rules do not yell at small people? Dominic nodded once. Do not disappear without saying goodbye. His face changed so slightly that only Eli noticed. And do not lie just because you are taller. Dominic looked at Mason for a long moment. Those are serious rules. They need to be. Do you follow them? I am not taller. Dominic almost smiled again. Mason pointed with satisfaction. Another weather break. What do I call you? Mason asked. Dominic. He repeated it slowly. Dom in ick. Dominic, that is too formal. It is my name. I will call you Dom. No one called him Dom. His father had used it once before blood and business turned affection into weakness. Mason said it like a door left open. Dominic allowed it. All right. Mason grinned. A woman's voice came from the far end of the hallway. Mason, I told you not to launch Bluebird near the entrance. The sound reached Dominic before the face did. His body knew her voice. Every muscle went still. Evelyn Carter came around the corner carrying a tray of small glazed bowls. She wore a cream sweater beneath a denim apron. Her dark hair touched her shoulders. There was blue paint along one wrist. She saw Mason first, then she saw Dominic kneeling in front of him. The tray slipped from her hands. Ceramic struck the floor. One bowl split in half, another spun in a slow circle before falling flat. Dominic stood. The hallway disappeared. For 6 years, he had imagined seeing her again, but never beneath fluorescent lights with children's paintings and a blue paper glider between them. Evelyn, he said. Her name sounded wrong in his mouth because he had refused to use it for so long. She did not answer. Mason looked between them. You know, Dom, Evelyn lowered herself to pick up the broken pieces, but her hands shook too hard. Yes, good. He needs practice talking to people. Dominic watched her gather the ceramic. She looked thinner. Her wedding ring was gone. Nothing about her life looked connected to his. Then his eyes moved to Mason. The boy stood close to her, too close to be anyone but hers. The old wound opened with such force that Dominic almost stepped back. Evelyn had wanted a child. She had simply not wanted his. Mason bent down beside her. Mom, your face went cold. I am fine. You say that when you are not. She placed the broken pieces on the tray and stood. Mason, please go with Miss Bell. I am still talking to Dom. Now. The sharpness in her voice made him blink. Dominic saw the fear that followed. Evelyn immediately softened. Please, sweetheart, I need 1 minute. Mason looked at Dominic. No disappearing. I will say goodbye, Dominic said. Mason studied him, then handed Bluebird to Margaret Bell and followed her toward the studio. He stopped at the doorway. Do not use thunder voices. Dominic's gaze remained on Evelyn. I remember the rules. When the studio door closed, the air changed. Evelyn turned toward him. You need to leave. Dominic said nothing for several seconds. You are alive. Her throat moved. This is not the place. 6 years. Lower your voice. You let me believe you were gone. I was gone. That is not what I meant. She looked toward the studio door. Please. The word did not soften him. It made the anger more precise. Dominic stepped closer. Eli quietly moved the others farther down the hall. The boy is yours, Dominic asked. Evelyn's face closed. Yes. How old is he? You heard him. 6 years and 10 months? Yes. The number settled between them. Dominic did not yet understand why it disturbed him. He only felt the old arithmetic begin. "What does that matter to you?" she asked. He looked at her as if she had struck him. "You wanted a child." Her eyes filled with something she refused to let fall. "Do not do this here. You wanted to be a mother, Dominic. Then why did you destroy mine?" The hallway seemed to contract around them. Evelyn turned her face away. For one instant, Dominic saw pain rather than guilt. Then it was gone. "You do not know what happened. I saw the report. You saw what they wanted you to see." His voice dropped. "Who are they?" She looked back at him. The fear in her eyes was no longer about Dominic alone. "That question is why you need to leave." He moved closer. "You disappeared after signing a medical consent. 3 months later, you filed to end our marriage. You refused every call. I never received your calls. You expect me to believe that?" "No." The answer stopped him. Evelyn folded her arms tightly. "I expect you to believe whatever lets you walk out of this building and never come near my son again. Your son. Yes. And mine." Pain crossed her face so quickly that he almost missed it. Then she straightened. "You are marrying Claire Mercer on Sunday. That was not my question. It is the only answer that matters." Dominic stared at her. "Why did you say staying would have killed him?" Her breath caught. She had said too much. From inside the studio came the sound of Mason laughing. Evelyn's fear sharpened. "Leave us alone. You think I can do that after finding you here? I think you have a wedding in 3 days." He looked past her toward the studio door. "You are afraid." "I learned to be. Of me, of what follows you." Dominic's jaw tightened. "You think I would hurt a child?" "I think people around you already tried." He went completely still. Evelyn seemed to realize she had crossed a line she could not uncross. Before he could speak, the studio door opened. Mason came running out with Bluebird in one hand and a paper sun in the other. "Mom, Miss Bell says I can put this in the window." He stopped when he saw their faces. "Are you fighting?" "No," Evelyn said. "Yes," Dominic said at the same time. Mason frowned. "That means yes." Evelyn took his hand. "We need to go home." Mason looked at Dominic. "Are you coming back Tuesday?" Evelyn's fingers tightened around his. Dominic felt her silent warning. He looked at Mason. "I will try." Mason shook his head. "That is almost disappearing language." Dominic had made far darker promises with less hesitation. "I will come back," he said. Mason's face brightened. "Good." Evelyn led him toward the exit. At the door, Mason twisted around. "Goodbye, Dom." Dominic answered quietly. "Goodbye, Mason." The child waved Bluebird over his head and disappeared into the afternoon. Dominic remained in the hallway long after the door closed. Eli approached. "You want the car?" Dominic looked down. A streak of blue paint marked his cuff where Mason's hand had brushed him. Not yet. Outside, Evelyn walked fast enough that Mason had to skip twice to keep up. "Mom." She did not answer. "Mom, what you are squeezing?" She released his hand immediately. "I'm sorry." Traffic groaned along the avenue. Everything looked ordinary. Evelyn knew better than to trust ordinary. Across the street, a dark gray sport utility vehicle sat beside a loading zone. The engine was running. The windows were tinted. A man behind the wheel held a phone near his chest. The lens pointed toward Mason. Evelyn stopped. The driver lowered the phone. For half a second, their eyes met through the windshield. Then the vehicle pulled into traffic. Evelyn reached for her own phone, but the license plate was already gone. Mason tugged her sleeve. "Was that your friend number Dom's friend? I do not know." Her voice sounded thin. She crouched in front of him and adjusted his jacket, even though it did not need adjusting. "Mason, listen to me. If anyone comes to school and says I sent them, what do you ask the family word? And if they do not know it, I run to a teacher. What is the word sunflower?" "Good." He studied her. "Are we moving again?" The question cut deeper than she expected. "No. You said that last time." Evelyn looked toward the traffic. "We are going home. That is not what I asked." She forced a smile. "We are going home." Mason was old enough to hear the difference, but young enough to let her keep it. They lived above a closed tailor shop. Evelyn had chosen the apartment because the fire stairs opened into an alley and every footstep carried through the thin walls. That evening she locked both deadbolts. Then she checked the windows. Then she checked the fire stairs. Mason sat at the kitchen table with Bluebird flattened beneath a stack of books. "Dom fixed it wrong," he said. Evelyn turned from the window. "What the wing? It bends too much. Then fix it." He tried. She looked at the glider. A careful crease ran along the left wing. Dominic had built the nursery shelves himself. The memory arrived without permission. She turned back to the stove. Mason watched her. "Is Dom bad?" The spoon stopped in the pot. "No." "Then why are you scared?" Evelyn stirred the pasta. "I am not scared of him. That is a lie." She looked over her shoulder. Mason pointed at her. Friend rule. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. He smiled because he had won. Evelyn lowered the heat and sat across from him. "I knew Dominic a long time ago. Before me, yes. Did he make your face cold then, too?" "No." "What did he make it?" She looked at her son's eyes. Dominic's eyes. "Warm," she said. Mason leaned back in his chair. "That seems better." It was. "Then what happened?" Evelyn looked toward the locked door. "People lied. About him, about both of us." "Did you believe them?" She thought of the clinic room, the restraints, the false signature, and the message beneath the photograph of the burning nursery. "I believed enough to run." Mason was quiet for a moment. "Can I still be his friend?" The question hurt in a place she had spent 6 years protecting. "We will talk about it later." Later means no when grown people are afraid to say no. Not always. Mostly. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown number. No message. Evelyn stared at the screen until it went dark. Across the city, Dominic stood in the library of the Vale estate with his coat still on. Through the windows, workers carried white flowers toward the chapel. Vivian's voice drifted from the corridor as she ordered someone to replace a row of gold chairs. Eli entered and closed the door. Dominic poured bourbon into a glass and did not drink it. "Find Evelyn Carter." Eli waited. Everything Dominic said, where she lives, where she works, every name she has used, the boy's birth date, the father's name. "And if the child has nothing to do with you," Dominic looked at the blue paint on his cuff, "then I need to know why 10 months sounded like a confession." Eli's expression changed. Dominic set the untouched glass on the desk. "And find the gray vehicle that watched them leave." Eli moved toward the door. "Eli." He turned. Dominic's voice was lower now. "Do not let Vivian know." For the first time that evening, the wedding preparations outside the library sounded less like celebration and more like someone covering a grave. By 7 the next morning, the flowers for Dominic's wedding had begun arriving at the Vale estate. White orchids filled the front hall. Men carried gold-framed mirrors into the chapel. A florist argued with Vivian about candle height, while 2 armed guards stood beneath a painting of Dominic's grandfather and pretended not to listen. Inside the library, none of it mattered. Eli Rourke placed a thin brown file on Dominic's desk. Dominic looked at it but did not open it. "You found her. I found what she allowed people to find." Eli remained standing. Evelyn Carter lived above a closed tailor shop on West 19th Street. She taught 3 afternoons a week at Harbor Street. On other days, she repaired embroidery, altered wedding gowns, and painted custom signs from home. She paid rent in cash. She had no credit cards, no registered vehicle, no husband, no visible partner. Dominic's attention sharpened, and the boy Eli slid the file closer. Mason Carter, born at Mercy Cross Community Hospital in Indiana. Dominic opened the folder. A school photograph had been clipped to the first page. Mason stood against a gray background wearing a blue shirt and a grin that showed one missing front tooth. His hair had refused to stay combed. One eyebrow lifted slightly higher than the other. Dominic stared at the photograph longer than he intended. "How old? 6 years and 10 months. "I know what he said." Eli turned a page. "He was born 7 weeks early." Dominic looked up. Eli placed one finger beside the date. "Count backward." Dominic did not need help. He counted anyway. The numbers formed slowly, then all at once. Mason had been born 4 months and 11 days after the night Dominic was told Evelyn's pregnancy had ended. A child born 7 weeks early would have been conceived at exactly the right time. Dominic looked at the photograph again. His fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. Birth certificate, no father listed. Medical records sparse, different clinics, different cities. She changed Mason's pediatrician 4 times before he was 5. Why? Possibly because she thought someone was looking. Dominic remembered Evelyn's words in the hallway. People around you already tried. He closed the file. What else 7 addresses in 6 years? Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, then back to Chicago. She kept moving. Yes, she never left the region. No. That answer hurt more than it should have. For 6 years, Dominic had imagined her on another continent, living beneath another name, choosing a life so far from him that finding her would have required crossing oceans. She had been within driving distance, some nights perhaps within the same city, and the vehicle Eli opened a second folder. Gray sport utility vehicle registered to a holding company in Oak Brook. The holding company was dissolved 8 months ago. The last listed manager worked for a security contractor Victor Hale used twice. Dominic's gaze lifted. Victor, I have not confirmed his involvement. He is involved, maybe. Dominic stood. The chair struck the wall behind him. Eli stepped into his path. If the boy is yours, you need to decide who walks into that apartment. Dominic's expression hardened. Move. No. Few men in Chicago had ever told Dominic Vale no and remained standing afterward. Eli had done it more than once. You have spent 6 years rehearsing what you would say if you found her, Eli said. Every version ends with anger. She lied to me. Maybe. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Eli did not step back. If Mason is your son, the first thing he cannot see is you breaking his mother. Silence settled between them. Outside, someone tested the chapel organ. A single note rose through the house and held. Dominic looked toward the library windows. Then he reached for his coat. I am going alone. Eli moved aside. West 19th Street was still wet from morning rain when Dominic arrived. The tailor shop beneath Evelyn's apartment had been closed for years. Dust covered the display window. A faded sign promised repairs while you waited. Dominic climbed the narrow staircase. The building smelled of old wood detergent and coffee. He stopped outside apartment 3. For 6 years he had imagined doors opening to reveal Evelyn. A hotel door, a hospital door, a house beside another man's car. Never this one. Paint chipped from the frame. 2 locks had been installed above the handle. A small paper sun had been taped beside the number. Dominic knocked. Footsteps approached. The locks opened one at a time. Evelyn saw him and tried to close the door. Dominic caught it with one hand. Her face went pale. You cannot be here. Mason was born 4 months after you disappeared. She pushed against the door. Take your hand away. You were still pregnant. Keep your voice down. From inside the apartment came Mason's voice. Bluebird cannot land in cereal. That is not an airport. A spoon struck a bowl. Dominic looked through the narrow opening. He could see part of a kitchen table, a red chair, and the edge of a child's sweater. Evelyn stepped into the hallway and pulled the door nearly closed behind her. Her body became a barrier. Dominic looked at her. Is he mine? She looked toward the stairs. Go home. Tell me I am wrong. You are getting married. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this. Dominic stepped closer. Look at me. She did. Fear sat openly in her eyes now. Not guilt, not shame. Fear. Is Mason my son? Evelyn's lips parted. No sound came. Dominic felt something inside him strain against 6 years of certainty. He lowered his voice. I buried him in my mind. Her eyes filled. I know. I stood in an empty nursery and believed there was nothing left of him. I know. You knew what I believed? Yes, his breathing changed. And you said nothing. Evelyn looked past him at the cracked stair rail. I said nothing because silence kept him alive. Answer me. Her face folded for 1 second. Then she forced it still. Yes. Dominic did not move. The word entered him slowly. Yes. Mason was his son. The child with the paper glider. The child who had corrected his face. The child who had asked him not to disappear. Dominic gripped the doorframe. He heard Mason moving around the kitchen. A chair scraped across the floor. The boy began humming to himself. 6 years of grief lived on the other side of a thin apartment door. Dominic looked at Evelyn. You let me believe he was dead. I let you believe I was gone. You hid my son from me. I hid him from the people who tried to make sure he was never born. The shock loosened Dominic's grip. What are you talking about? Evelyn shook her head. You have the answer, now leave. No, Dominic. Who tried to hurt you? She looked toward the apartment. Not here. Vivian. Her breath caught. It was almost nothing. It was enough. Dominic's voice became colder. Victor. She closed her eyes. Rage moved through him with frightening clarity, not the wild anger that broke furniture or spilled blood. This was quieter, the kind that chose names. The apartment door opened behind Evelyn. Mason appeared wearing striped pajamas and carrying Bluebird by one wing. Milk covered his upper lip. He looked at Dominic and smiled. You came back. Every hard line in Dominic's face changed. He crouched without thinking. I said I would. Mason pushed the door open farther. Mom was hiding you. I was not hiding him, Evelyn said. You were talking in the hallway. That is hiding with sound. Dominic looked at the child. Mason stepped closer and examined his suit. You wear the same clothes every day. They are different suits. They are all black. That does not make them the same. Mason considered this. It mostly does. Evelyn placed one hand on Mason's shoulder. Go finish breakfast. Is Dom eating? No, Dominic said. Not today. Mason looked between them. You are doing thunder voices without thunder. We are talking, Evelyn said, badly. Dominic almost smiled. Mason pointed at him. Weather break. Dominic took a breath. The boy nodded in approval. Better. Evelyn guided Mason back inside. He stopped at the kitchen doorway. You are not leaving before goodbye. I will not. Once Mason disappeared, Dominic stood. Tell me. Evelyn looked exhausted. You do not get to walk in here, learn one truth, and demand all the others. My son is being watched. Her face sharpened. You saw the vehicle. My people traced it to a company connected to Victor. The blood drained from her face. Dominic saw confirmation before she spoke. They found us. They were already watching before I knew. That does not make it better. No, it makes waiting more dangerous. She pressed both hands against her arms as if trying to hold herself together. Dominic lowered his voice. I need to know what happened. For several seconds, Evelyn said nothing. Then she glanced through the door toward Mason. Not inside. They moved to the far end of the hallway. Rain tapped against the narrow stairwell window. Evelyn kept her back to the wall. Vivian invited me to dinner. Dominic remembered the night. He had been sent to Milwaukee because one of their warehouses had supposedly been attacked. By the time he learned the report was false, the return route had been blocked by a wreck. What dinner? She said she wanted peace before the baby came. Vivian never wanted peace with you. I knew that. I went because you asked me to try. Dominic remembered telling Evelyn that Vivian would eventually accept the marriage. He had believed time could soften a woman who treated affection like a weakness in the walls. Evelyn continued. The car lost its brakes near the Eisenhower underpass. Dominic stared at her. What my driver tried to stop. We hit the barrier. Who was driving Daniel Price? Dominic knew the name. Daniel had worked for the family for 11 years. He died in the crash, Evelyn said. Dominic had been told Daniel disappeared after stealing money. Another lie. I woke in a clinic. Her voice changed. It grew quieter, as if every word had to pass through the room she was remembering. My wrist was tied to the bed. There was an intravenous line in my arm. A doctor said the baby was in distress. Dominic's jaw tightened. Which clinic I did not know then. There were no signs inside the room. Vivian was there. Yes, the hallway seemed to darken around him. She stood at the foot of the bed and told me you had made a decision. What decision? That the pregnancy was too dangerous for the family. That you had signed authorization for the doctors to do whatever was necessary. I signed nothing. She showed me your signature. It was forged. I know that now. Evelyn looked toward the window. At the time, I did not know what to believe. I had been in an accident. I was drugged. I could barely keep my eyes open. Dominic saw the scene against his will. Evelyn alone in a white room, their child alive inside her, his name used as a weapon. She played a recording, Evelyn said. His voice became rough. What recording? You said you would not bring a child into the world if it threatened the family. Dominic closed his eyes. He remembered the original conversation. He and Evelyn had been standing in the unfinished nursery. She had asked what would happen if Vivian tried to control their child. Dominic had answered that he would not bring their baby into a world where his family controlled the locks. The recording had removed everything except the words they needed. They cut it. Yes. Why did you believe it? Evelyn looked at him. I did not want to. That is not an answer. I woke tied to a bed, Dominic. My driver was dead. Your stepmother had your signature. Your voice was telling me our baby threatened your family. He flinched. She saw it. I am not saying you deserved what they did to you, she said. I am telling you what they made me see. Dominic looked away. What happened after that? A nurse came in when Vivian left. Evelyn's fingers pressed into her sleeves. Her name was Leah. She checked the monitor and whispered that the baby's heartbeat was strong. Dominic's breath stopped. She told me there was no medical reason for the procedure they were preparing. His hand closed into a fist. Did Vivian order it? I heard Victor outside the room. The rain struck harder against the glass. What did he say? He said the problem had to be finished before you returned. Dominic looked down at the floorboards. He had trusted Victor with contracts, court cases, and family secrets. The man had stood beside him after Evelyn disappeared and explained why grief made people irrational. What did the nurse do? She removed the intravenous line. She found clothes in the laundry room. She told me the service elevator went to an alley. You escaped alone. She walked me to the elevator. She was crying. Where is she now? I do not know. Evelyn looked back toward the apartment. I left with no phone, no money, and blood on my sleeve. I walked until a woman at a gas station let me use her phone. You called me. Yes. I never received it. A man answered. Who? He said you did not want to speak to me. Dominic's face hardened. What man? I never knew his name. He told me the pregnancy had already caused enough trouble. Then the call ended. Dominic remembered lying in a hospital bed after the staged attack outside Milwaukee. He had been awake for only minutes at a time. Vivian had controlled who entered the room. Hours later, someone sent a photograph to the gas station fax machine, Evelyn said. A photograph of what? The nursery? Dominic knew before she finished. It was burning. He saw the pale blue ceiling he had painted, the white crib still in its box, the shelves he had built with his own hands. The fire had been called an electrical accident. There was a message beneath the picture, Evelyn said. What did it say? Next time it will not be an empty room. Dominic looked at her. You thought I sent it. I did not know who sent it. You thought I might have. I had just heard your voice telling me our child was a threat. Pain moved across his face. Evelyn looked away. I ran because every road back to you went through people who had already reached me first. Dominic braced one hand against the wall. For years he had carried a single version of that night. Evelyn had chosen to end their child. She had refused to see him. She had fled rather than face what she had done. Now, every certainty split open. My turn, he said. Evelyn looked at him. I was sent to Milwaukee because Victor reported an attack on the warehouse. There was no attack. I know. On the way home, a truck forced my car off the road. Her eyes widened. I was told you were at a meeting. I woke in a private hospital with 2 broken ribs and enough sedative in my blood to lose half the next day. Dominic swallowed. Vivian said you had been in an accident. She said the doctors discovered complications and you chose the procedure. I never chose it. She showed me a signed consent form. It was not mine. I know. The words came out with difficulty. I asked to see you. She said you refused. Evelyn covered her mouth. They increased the medication every time I tried to leave. Dominic's gaze fixed on the far wall. When I finally reached the clinic, the room was empty. They gave me a report saying the baby had died. Evelyn's eyes filled. There was no body. They said medical disposal had already been completed because you signed permission. Her knees weakened. She pressed her shoulder against the wall. Dominic continued because stopping would have been worse. There was a voicemail from you. What did it say? That you would never raise a child in my world. That I should not look for you. I said those words to Vivian. When before the accident. She asked whether I trusted the Vale family. I told her I would never raise my child inside a house where fear decided everything. They edited that too. Yes. Dominic looked at her. I sent men after you. You sent the wrong men. I know that now. They never found me. They found airport footage. A woman wearing your coat entered a terminal under your name. It was not me. They found hotel records in Montreal. then Denver, then Buenos Aires, all false. Every lead ended with another message telling me to stop. Evelyn's voice softened despite herself. Why did you? Dominic did not answer immediately, because he had been grieving, because every person near him had insisted she hated him, because pride had been easier to carry than hope. 3 months later, Victor gave me separation papers, he said. I never filed anything. They had your signature. I never signed. They said you wanted no contact, no property, and no claim on the Vale name. Evelyn stared at him. And you believed that I believed you had already left me in every way that mattered. The words remained between them. Neither was innocent. Neither was guilty of the crime that had divided them. Both had allowed pain to become certainty. From inside the apartment came the sound of a glass tipping over. Mason called, I fixed it. Evelyn wiped her face quickly. Dominic looked toward the door. Our son. The words broke something in her expression. Yes. He said it again. Quieter. Our son. Evelyn lowered her voice. He does not know. Why, what was I supposed to tell him? That his father ruled a world where children could become targets before they were born. You could have told him I existed. And then he would have asked where you were. Dominic had no answer. He asks about his father, she said. Not every day. Usually when school has family events. Sometimes when another child gets picked up by both parents. Dominic looked through the narrow gap beside the door. Mason sat at the kitchen table wiping milk with a towel much too large for his hands. What do you tell him, that his father did not know where we were? That is true. It is the safest version of the truth. Dominic turned back to Evelyn. I want to meet him. You already did, as his father. No. The refusal struck hard. He is my son. He is not a possession. I did not say he was. You did not have to. Dominic stepped back. Eli's warning returned to him. Do not make his first memory of you a fight with his mother. What do you need, he asked. Evelyn seemed surprised. To keep him safe, from Vivian and Victor, from anyone who thinks his blood gives them a claim. Dominic nodded once. No one takes him from you. You cannot promise that. I can. That is exactly the kind of promise men like you make before they decide protection means control. His face tightened. I am not taking him. You came here with a file on his life. I came because someone photographed him outside his school. The arts center. They will find the school. Fear crossed her face. Her phone vibrated inside her pocket. She pulled it out. Unknown number. This time there was a message. Evelyn read it. All the color left her face. Dominic reached for the phone. She pulled it back. What does it say? Nothing. Show me. No. Her hand shook. Dominic did not grab her. He waited. A second message appeared. The sound was small. Evelyn flinched as if a gun had fired. She turned the screen toward him. The first message read, You should have stayed buried. The second appeared beneath it. The boy will not reach 7 if Vale learns he is breathing. Dominic read the words twice. Something cold settled over his face. Pack a bag. Evelyn took the phone back. No, they know who he is. This is why I stayed away. They were watching before I knew, because someone saw you speak to him. Victor's vehicle was already outside. You do not know that. I know enough. Evelyn shook her head. I am not going to the estate. I am not taking you there. I am not going anywhere with you. The phone vibrated again. A photograph filled the screen. Mason leaving his school 2 days earlier. His green backpack hung from one shoulder. Beneath the image were 5 words. We know the usual route. Evelyn closed her eyes. Inside the apartment, Mason began singing to Bluebird. The ordinary sound nearly destroyed her. Dominic lowered his voice. Listen to me. She opened her eyes. I am not taking your child. Our child. The correction left her lips before she could stop it. Dominic's expression shifted. Yes, he said. Our child. He kept his hands at his sides. I will not tell him the truth without you. I will not force you into my house. But someone has watched his school, his work, and this apartment. It is my work. You know what I mean. She looked toward the door. Dominic continued. I have a house outside the city. Vivian does not know about it. Victor does not control the security. How can I believe you? You cannot. The honesty silenced her. Not yet, he said, but you can believe the photograph. Evelyn looked down at Mason's image. The boy was turning toward the camera, perhaps because he had heard his name. Her hands began to shake harder. Dominic reached for the door, then stopped before touching it. "Pack what he needs." Evelyn wiped her eyes. "You do not give orders in my home. Then consider it a request." She stared at him. Dominic Vale did not request, not from judges, not from enemies, not from the people who worked for him. "Please," he said. The word carried no command, only fear. Evelyn opened the door. Mason looked up from the kitchen table. "Are we going somewhere?" She forced her voice steady. "For a few days." His expression fell. "We are moving." "No. You always say a few days." Evelyn crossed the kitchen and knelt beside him. "This time I am telling you the truth. We are going somewhere safe." Mason looked toward Dominic. "Is Dom coming, yes?" Dominic said from the doorway. Mason thought about it. "Does the safe place have pancakes?" Dominic looked at Evelyn. "I am sure it does." Mason picked up Bluebird. "Then I need my green sweater." Evelyn packed in 7 minutes. Mason's inhaler, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pajamas, the green sweater, his school notebook, a stuffed bear with one eye. Bluebird went into Mason's hands because he insisted airplanes became nervous inside bags. Dominic made one call from the hallway. He spoke quietly. No uniforms, no marked cars. 2 exits covered. Eli only. When they stepped outside, the street looked unchanged. A woman carried grocery bags toward the corner. A city bus hissed at the curb. A dog barked from an upstairs window. 3 men stood at separate points along the block. They wore ordinary coats and did not look at Dominic. Evelyn noticed them anyway. "Your people?" "Yes." Mason leaned close to her. "They all have storm eyebrows." One of the men heard him and looked away. Dominic opened the rear door of a dark vehicle. Evelyn stopped. For 6 years, every car had meant checking the brakes, the locks, the driver, and the road behind them. Dominic saw the hesitation. He handed her the keys. "You drive." She looked at him. "You trust me with your car. I trust you with something more important." Mason climbed into the back seat. Dominic took the passenger side. Evelyn placed both hands on the steering wheel. She had spent 6 years running from this man. Now he sat beside her while their son talked about whether Bluebird would prefer the city or the lake. As they pulled away, a black sedan turned onto the street behind them. Eli's vehicle moved between it and Mason. Dominic watched through the side mirror. Evelyn kept her eyes on the road. Neither of them spoke. In the back seat, Mason leaned forward between them. "Dom, yes, you said goodbye yesterday." "I did." "And you came back?" "Yes." Mason settled against the seat. "Good." Dominic looked out the window before the child could see what the word did to him. The Chicago skyline disappeared behind rain and gray clouds. Evelyn drove north with Bluebird resting in Mason's lap and Dominic's silence beside her. For the first time in 6 years, she was no longer running alone. The rain followed them north. Chicago thinned into wet highways, service roads, and dark fields bordered by bare trees. Mason fell asleep before they reached the county line, one hand curled around Bluebird and the other resting against the door. Dominic watched him through the mirror. Every few minutes he checked that the child was still breathing. Evelyn noticed. She said nothing. The house stood beyond a rusted gate near Lake Geneva, hidden behind cedar trees and a long gravel drive. It was smaller than Evelyn expected. 2 stories of gray stone and dark wood faced the water. No family crest marked the entrance. No guards waited on the porch. Only Eli stood beneath the front light. He opened the rear door when they stopped. Mason woke with a start. "Are we being arrested?" No, Evelyn said. He rubbed his eyes. "Good. I did not pack court clothes." Eli looked at Dominic. Dominic almost smiled. The lake lay beyond the house like a sheet of black metal. Rain struck its surface in small silver circles. Mason stepped out and looked toward the water. "Does the lake sleep? I do not know," Dominic said. Mason frowned. "You are supposed to know important things." "I know some things." Like what Dominic glanced toward Eli. "Security. That sounds boring." "It often is." Mason held Bluebird under his jacket to protect it from the rain. "Do you know pancakes?" Dominic answered too quickly. "Yes." Evelyn looked at him. He ignored her. Inside the house was warm and quiet. A stone fireplace occupied one wall of the living room. The furniture was plain. Framed photographs had been removed from the shelves, leaving clean squares in the dust. Evelyn noticed the absence. Who owned this place, my mother? Dominic walked to the kitchen and turned on the lights. The answer changed the room. Mason wandered toward a narrow hallway. "Do not go upstairs alone," Evelyn said. He stopped. "Why?" "Because we need to look first." Dominic called Eli. They checked every room together. 2 bedrooms stood upstairs, separated by a small bathroom. The windows were locked. A narrow attic door had been sealed from the outside. A second staircase led down to the kitchen. Evelyn tested every latch herself. Dominic waited. When they returned downstairs, she faced him near the fireplace. "We need rules." Mason looked interested. "More rules. These are grown-up rules. Those are usually worse." Evelyn kept her attention on Dominic. No armed men inside the house. Dominic nodded. "Agreed. No one enters Mason's room unless I know." "Agreed. No one asks him questions about where we lived, who we knew, or what I told him." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Agreed. You do not tell him you are his father." Mason was examining a wooden duck on the mantel and did not seem to hear. Dominic looked toward him, then back at Evelyn. "How long until we decide what is safest? He deserves the truth. Yes, he also deserves more than one night to understand it." Dominic lowered his voice. "I have already lost 6 years, and he is not responsible for giving them back." The words struck cleanly. Dominic looked at the floor for 1 second. "Agreed," Evelyn continued. "I choose who takes him anywhere. I approve every guard. I keep my phone, yes. And I am not a prisoner." "You are not. If I decide to leave his eyes lifted, then you tell me first." "That is not an answer." Dominic breathed in slowly. "If you decide to leave, I will not stop you. Your men, they will not stop you. Your family. No one from my family knows this house exists." Evelyn studied him. "Vivian knew your mother. She knew there was a property. She never knew where." How my mother kept one thing for herself. For the first time, Dominic's voice carried something close to tenderness. Mason turned from the mantel. "Can I have the room with the blue curtains?" Evelyn glanced upstairs. "Yes. The curtains are ugly." "Then why do you want it? Because the other room smells like old socks." Eli coughed into his hand. Dominic looked at him. "I will check the ventilation." "That will not help old socks," Mason said. They ate soup from the kitchen cabinets because none of them had the energy for anything else. Mason sat between Evelyn and Dominic at the table. Dominic barely touched his food. Mason noticed. "Do you not like soup?" "It is fine. You keep looking at me." Dominic looked down at his bowl. "My mistake. Mom does that too." Evelyn lifted her spoon. "I do not. You do when I sleep." Dominic looked at her. She avoided his eyes. Mason tore a piece of bread in half. People look at things they think might disappear. No one answered. After dinner, Evelyn helped Mason change into pajamas. He insisted Bluebird needed its own place to sleep, so she set the glider on the dresser beneath the lamp. Mason climbed under the blanket. "Is Dom staying?" "Yes." "Where downstairs?" "Why?" "Because we all need rest." He thought about this. "Are the bad people coming here?" Evelyn sat beside him. No, it was not quite a lie. Dominic stood outside the open door. Mason saw him. Friend rule. Dominic stepped into the room but stayed near the wall. "What rule? Do not lie because you are taller." Evelyn closed her eyes. Mason looked between them. "Something bad happened." "Yes," Evelyn said. "Is that why we left?" "Yes." "Is it about Dom?" Dominic answered. "It is about people who made dangerous choices." "Are they mad at Mom?" "Yes." Why Evelyn reached for his hand. "Because sometimes people are afraid of what they cannot control. Can they control me?" No, Dominic's answer came before hers. Mason looked at him. Dominic remained still. "No one controls you," he said. "You listen to your mother, you follow safety rules, but you belong to yourself." Mason considered that. "Even when I have homework, homework may be an exception." Mason smiled. Evelyn did not. "Will you be here when I wake up?" he asked Dominic. "Yes, that is a promise." Dominic looked at Evelyn. She gave no sign of approval or refusal. He returned his attention to Mason. "It is." Mason settled into the pillow. "Good night, Dom." "Good night, Mason." Dominic waited in the hallway until Evelyn switched off the lamp. They went downstairs without speaking. Eli stood near the kitchen counter with a tablet in his hand. 2 cars at the gate, 4 men in the woods, another team on the road. Evelyn looked at the windows. I said no armed men inside. They are outside, Dominic said. And if they need the bathroom, Eli answered. They have another building near the road. Mason's footsteps creaked above them. All 3 adults looked toward the ceiling. Eli lowered his voice. The vehicle from the arts center was found behind a warehouse near Cicero, cleaned, no prints. Cameras, Dominic asked. 2 were disabled. 1 caught the driver leaving on foot. Do we know him? Not yet. Evelyn crossed her arms. How many people does Victor control? Dominic looked at Eli. Enough to make assumptions dangerous. Eli placed the tablet on the counter. I will have names by morning. He left through the back door. Dominic remained in the kitchen. Evelyn opened a cabinet, found coffee, then closed it again. You should sleep, he said. So should you, I will. She looked at him. No, you will sit by a window and wait for someone to come. He did not deny it. Evelyn moved toward the stairs. Why did your mother keep this place secret? Dominic's face changed. She did not trust my father. And you? I was 12. That is not what I asked. He looked toward the dark windows. She trusted me before I gave her reasons not to. Evelyn waited. Dominic said nothing more. She went upstairs. At 2 in the morning, she woke to the sound of a door opening. She sat up instantly. For one violent second, she was back in the clinic. White walls, a needle beside the bed, a voice in the corridor. Then she heard Mason. I am thirsty. Evelyn left her room. Dominic stood at the end of the hallway. He had removed his jacket. His white shirt sleeves were rolled to his forearms. Mason walked toward him, holding his stuffed bear. You said you would be downstairs. I was. You are upstairs now. You were walking. Mason accepted the explanation. Dominic carried him to the kitchen while Evelyn followed. Mason drank water, then looked at Dominic's hands. What happened to that? A pale scar crossed Dominic's palm. Glass. Did it hurt? Yes. Did you cry? Dominic opened his mouth. Evelyn expected him to avoid the question. Yes. Mason nodded. That is normal. So I have been told. Mason looked at Evelyn. Can Dom take me back? She hesitated. Dominic did not move until she nodded. He carried Mason upstairs. The boy rested his head against Dominic's shoulder with the careless trust of sleep. Evelyn followed a few steps behind. At the bedroom door, Dominic lowered Mason onto the bed. He pulled the blanket over him with awkward care. Mason opened one eye. Do not disappear. I am here. His eye closed. Dominic remained beside the bed. Evelyn touched his arm. He followed her into the hallway. He cannot know yet, she whispered. I know. You look at him like you want to tell him every second. I do. That will frighten him. Dominic looked back through the open door. I am trying. Evelyn heard the truth in it. She returned to her room before she could answer. In the morning, smoke filled the kitchen. Evelyn ran downstairs. Dominic stood over the stove holding a blackened pancake with a metal spatula. Mason sat at the counter. He lied about pancakes. I did not lie. You said you knew them. I know what they are. That is not the same. Evelyn opened a window. What happened? Dominic looked at the pan. The heat was too high. Mason shook his head. You used too much muscle. It is batter. Pancakes can feel anger. Evelyn covered her mouth. Dominic looked at her. She laughed. The sound surprised all 3 of them. It was small and tired, but real. Dominic watched her as if she had given him something. Evelyn looked away first. Mason pointed to the mixing bowl. Mom, you have to save breakfast. She joined them at the stove. Dominic moved aside. No, Mason said. Dom has to learn. He may burn the house down. That is why you supervise. Dominic poured another circle of batter. It spread unevenly. Mason leaned forward. Wait. I am waiting. Longer. The edges began to dry. Now, Dominic flipped it. The pancake landed half in the pan and half against the stove. Mason stared at it. That one made a choice. Evelyn laughed again. Dominic slid the broken pancake onto a plate. The next one came out round. Mason examined it carefully. Temporary breakfast duty. Dominic placed it in front of him. What do I need for permanent duty? 3 good pancakes and no smoke. That seems unreasonable. It is breakfast law. For 20 minutes, the kitchen felt ordinary. Evelyn hated how much she wanted it. After breakfast, Mason carried Bluebird to the living room. The left wing had bent again during the trip. Dominic sat beside him on the rug. "You pressed the fold too hard," Mason said. "I repaired the damage you caused. It was a difficult landing. You threw it into a wall." The wall moved emotionally. Dominic took a fresh piece of blue paper from the arts bag. "Show me how you do it." Mason sat closer. He folded the paper carefully and explained every step. "First, both sides have to meet in the middle." Dominic followed his hands. "Not one side first, no. Then it thinks it is more important." Dominic glanced at Evelyn. She sat near the window with a cup of coffee. "What if one side is stronger?" Mason pressed the crease. "Strong does not mean boss." Evelyn looked down at her cup. Dominic folded the next section. Mason watched him. "There are new rules. More paperwork." "Yes." He raised one finger. "Do not yell at Mom." Dominic stopped folding. "I will not. She says she is not scared when she is." Evelyn set down her coffee. "Mason, it is true." Dominic looked at her. "I will not yell." Mason raised another finger. "Do not promise things only because people are scared." Dominic nodded slowly. "And if you leave, say when you are coming back. What if I do not know, say you do not know. That is acceptable. It is better than disappearing." Dominic pressed the final fold. "All right." Mason took the new glider. "You have to name it." "I thought it was Bluebird. That is the old one." Dominic studied the paper. "North." Mason frowned. "That is not an airplane name. It is a direction. Airplanes need names with feelings," Dominic thought. "Hope." Mason looked at Evelyn. She had gone very still. "That is too serious," he said. Dominic turned the glider over. "Then you choose." Mason wrote on the side with a blue marker. "Stay." He held it up. "That is a name and an instruction." Dominic looked at the word. "Yes," he said, "it is." Near noon, Eli arrived carrying 2 folders and a sealed envelope. Mason was outside on the porch testing stay over the lawn. 2 guards watched from the tree line. Evelyn remained at the door. Eli entered the kitchen. "We found the driver from the arts center." "Alive?" Dominic asked. "Yes." "Where, Indiana?" "He crossed the state line last night." "Who paid him?" "He says he received cash through a third party." "Victor." He did not see Victor directly. Dominic opened the first folder. Inside were surveillance photographs, account records, and the driver's statement. Evelyn closed the porch door. "What is the second file?" Eli looked at Dominic. "The separation." Evelyn frowned. "What separation?" Dominic turned toward her. "The petition you filed 3 months after you left." "I never filed one." Eli placed the file on the table. The room became silent. Evelyn opened it. Her name appeared at the top of the first page. Evelyn Marie Vale. Beneath it was a request for legal separation based on abandonment and irreconcilable differences. She read the paragraph slowly. She had surrendered all claim to property. She had refused financial support. She had requested no contact from Dominic or anyone acting on his behalf. At the bottom sat a signature that looked almost like hers. Almost. Evelyn touched the ink. "This is not my hand." Dominic stood across from her. "I was told it was." She turned the page. A statement had been attached. "There is no surviving child of this marriage." Her knees weakened. She gripped the table. Dominic reached for her. She pulled away. "Do not." He stopped. Eli opened the envelope. "The court stamp is false. The filing number belongs to an unrelated civil case. Nothing was properly entered." Evelyn looked at Dominic. "You signed this." His signature appeared beneath an acknowledgement. "I signed a statement saying I would not contest what I believed you wanted. You signed away our marriage. I thought you had already ended it. You did not ask me. I could not find you. You stopped looking." Dominic's face tightened. "Yes." The answer came without defense. Evelyn stared at him. "I had just given birth in a motel room outside Gary because I was afraid a hospital would report my name. I was bleeding. Mason could not breathe properly. A retired midwife drove us across the state line." Dominic's hands curled at his sides. "While I was trying to keep him alive, they were writing that he did not exist." Eli looked away. Dominic remained still. "I believed it," he said. "That does not make it less cruel." "No." Evelyn turned to Eli. What does this mean legally? The marriage was never dissolved. She looked back at Dominic. He met her eyes. You are still my wife. Her expression hardened. Paper did not protect me when I needed it. Paper does not own me now, I know. The quiet answer unsettled her more than an argument. Outside, Mason knocked on the window. Stay had landed on the roof. Dominic looked toward him. The boy pointed upward with both hands. Can you get it? Dominic went outside. Evelyn watched him drag a ladder from the shed and climb toward the roof. Eli stood beside her. He did look for you. She kept her eyes on Dominic. How long? Almost a year. Then every lead told him you were alive and choosing not to return. Vivian made sure hope became humiliation. Evelyn looked at Eli. You knew her. I knew what Dominic believed. That is not the same. No. Eli lowered his voice. I should have questioned more. They watched Dominic retrieve the paper glider. Mason cheered from the grass. Dominic climbed down and handed it to him. The boy immediately asked him to throw it. Dominic did. Stay rose into the wind. It flew farther than Bluebird ever had. That afternoon, Evelyn insisted Mason attend the children's exhibit at Harbor Street. Dominic refused. No, you do not decide. Someone photographed him outside his school, and locking him inside a house will not erase that. It will keep him alive. It will teach him danger controls everything. Dominic lowered his voice. He was nearly 7 before I knew he existed. I am not gambling with one afternoon. Evelyn stepped closer. You do not get to use your fear as a cage. His jaw tightened. And you do not get to pretend this is an ordinary afternoon. Mason sat on the stairs listening. Neither noticed him. I have protection in place, Evelyn said. My protection I approved. Not enough. Mason spoke from the stairs. Are you yelling at Mom? Dominic closed his eyes. He lowered his voice. No, you were almost. You are right. Mason came down. The exhibit has my clay fox. Dominic looked at him. It will still be there another day. No, today it gets a ribbon. Evelyn knelt beside Mason. We are deciding how to go safely. Mason looked at Dominic. Dom thinks no. Yes, Mom thinks yes. Yes. What does Eli think? Eli stood near the door. I think the safest plan is one Mason does not recognize as a prison. Dominic looked at him. Eli continued. We control the building. We control the street. He enters through the front and leaves through the side after 40 minutes. Dominic remained silent. Evelyn waited. Finally, he nodded. 40 minutes. Mason smiled. 45, 40, 42. Dominic looked at Evelyn. She almost smiled. 42, he said. Harbor Street appeared normal when they arrived. Children carried clay figures through the main doors. Parents crowded the lobby. A teacher taped ribbons beside the displays. Dominic's men occupied the sidewalk, the alley, and 2 parked vehicles. Evelyn stayed close to Mason. Dominic watched every face. Mason's clay fox sat on a shelf with one ear larger than the other. A yellow ribbon had been placed beside it. He stared at the ribbon. I won. It says participation, Evelyn said. That means winning politely. Dominic stood behind them. Mason pointed to the fox. I made the ear wrong. It looks alert, Dominic said. It looks confused. Those can be similar. Mason looked pleased. After 42 minutes, Miss Bell offered to walk Mason toward the side exit while Evelyn collected his coat. Dominic stepped into the hall to answer Eli's call. A second vehicle just turned onto the block, Eli said through the phone. What vehicle? White van. No plates on the front. Dominic turned toward the side corridor. The door at the end of the hall was open. Outside, a man in a school district jacket approached Miss Bell. He carried a clipboard. Mason stood beside her holding his clay fox. The man smiled. Mrs. Carter asked me to bring Mason around front. Miss Bell hesitated. She is inside. There is a plumbing leak near the main hall. She is waiting by the parking lot. Mason looked at the man's badge, then at his face. What is the word? The man's smile remained. Your mother said there was no time. What is the word? Miss Bell stepped closer to Mason. The man reached out. Mason moved back. The man grabbed his sleeve. Mason screamed. Mom Evelyn heard him from the coat room. She dropped everything and ran. Dominic reached the side door first. He crossed the lane in seconds. The attacker pulled Mason toward the white van. Miss Bell held onto the boy's other arm. Dominic struck the man once. The attacker released Mason and hit the brick wall. A second man opened the van door. Eli's vehicle blocked the lane. 2 Vale guards dragged the second man to the ground. Evelyn reached Mason and fell to her knees around him. He shook so hard his teeth clicked. "I asked for the word. You did right. He grabbed me. I know." I screamed. "You did right." Dominic had the first attacker pinned against the wall. Blood ran from the man's mouth. "Who sent you?" The man laughed once. Dominic struck him again. "Who sent you?" The man remained silent. Dominic reached beneath his coat. Mason looked up. His face changed when he saw the gun. Evelyn saw it. "Dominic." He looked at her. Not in front of him. The lane went still. Dominic's hand remained beneath his coat. Rage filled every line of his body. Then he looked at Mason. The boy's eyes were wide. Dominic slowly removed his empty hand. He released the attacker. "Take them alive," he told Eli. The men were pulled into separate vehicles. Dominic stayed beside the wall for one moment, breathing hard. Then he turned toward Evelyn and Mason. He approached slowly. Mason held his clay fox against his chest. Dominic stopped several feet away and lowered himself to one knee. "Are you hurt?" Mason shook his head. "Did he touch your neck? No. Your face? No. Your arms? My sleeve?" Dominic looked at the torn fabric. Mason looked at the blood on his knuckles. "You came fast." "Yes." "Were you scared?" Dominic swallowed. "More than I have ever been." Mason studied him. Then he stepped away from Evelyn. She reached for him but stopped. Mason crossed the space between himself and Dominic. He wrapped both arms around Dominic's neck. Dominic froze. His hands hovered near the child's back. Then he held him, carefully, as if Mason were something made of breath and light. Dominic closed his eyes. Evelyn watched his face change. The feared man remained beneath the suit and the blood, but something else had entered the space around him, something unguarded. Mason whispered near his ear, "You did not disappear." "No." "You came." "Yes." Mason tightened his arms. "Good." Dominic's face broke quietly. Evelyn looked away because the moment felt too private to witness and too painful to ignore. That night, Mason refused to sleep alone. Evelyn lay beside him until his breathing slowed. Bluebird rested beneath one pillow. Stay rested beneath the other. When she went downstairs, Dominic stood at the kitchen sink, washing blood from his hands. The water ran pink, then clear. "You stopped," she said. "He shut off the faucet. You asked me to. Mason was watching. I know. He will remember that." Dominic dried his hands. "He will remember that I almost did not. He will remember what you chose." Dominic looked at her. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first thing she had offered that did not sound like a door closing. Eli entered through the back. His coat was wet. One of them talked. Dominic's expression changed. "What did he say?" "He received instructions through Victor's office." Evelyn gripped the edge of the counter, and Vivian Eli placed a phone on the table. The captured man's voice played through the speaker. "Mrs. Vale said the boy had to be gone before Sunday. Everything had to be finished before the wedding." Silence filled the kitchen. Dominic looked toward the stairs. Mason slept above them, trusting the walls because the adults had told him they were safe. Dominic turned off the recording. "The wedding is where she feels protected." Evelyn understood. "No, every family she lied to will be there. You want revenge. I want proof no one can bury. You could cancel it quietly." Dominic stepped closer but left space between them. "They erased you quietly. They wrote our son out of existence quietly. They used silence because silence belonged to them." Evelyn shook her head. "Mason is not a weapon." "No." Dominic looked toward the stairs again. "He is the reason this cannot become revenge." Eli waited near the door. Evelyn studied Dominic's face. The storm remained, but he was no longer asking how to punish the people who had stolen his family. He was deciding how to make sure they could never steal them again. Dominic returned his gaze to her. "I will not place Mason in front of them without your consent. You do not have it. Then he stays with Eli until the room is secure. And me, you choose." Evelyn looked at the forged separation papers on the table. Her false signature sat beneath words that had erased her marriage, her child, and her right to be believed. For 6 years she had survived by leaving before danger closed the door. Now danger knew her address, her son's school, and the name of the art teacher who walked him outside. Running no longer hid them. It only gave their enemies another road to follow. Evelyn lifted her eyes. I will not stand beside you like property you recovered. You will not. I speak for myself. Yes, if Mason becomes frightened, we leave immediately. And if Vivian looks at him as if he belongs to her, Dominic's face became still. She will never stand near him again. Evelyn held his gaze. The house was quiet around them. On the table lay the proof of a marriage that had never legally ended. Upstairs slept the child who had survived every attempt to erase him. Evelyn placed one hand over the false signature. Then she looked at Dominic. Show me everything Eli has. Dominic opened the first file. Evelyn opened the first file. By midnight, the kitchen table had disappeared beneath 6 years of stolen truth. There were clinic invoices hidden behind consulting fees, telephone records routed through private exchanges, copies of medical forms bearing signatures that belonged to no one in the room. Eli had arranged the pages in careful order, but nothing about them felt orderly. Each document represented a moment when someone had decided that Evelyn's fear, Dominic's grief, and Mason's life were acceptable costs. Dominic stood across from her, one hand resting against the back of a chair. He had not spoken in several minutes. Evelyn read the same transfer record twice. The payment had come from a company registered in Nevada. That company belonged to another company in Delaware. The final account had been controlled by Victor Hale. The date matched the night of the crash. How long has Victor handled your family's legal affairs? She asked. 23 years. He knew your father, yes, and your mother Dominic looked toward the dark window. He prepared her estate. Evelyn lowered the page. Then he knew about this house. No, my mother removed it from the family trust before Victor took control of her records. Eli sat near the end of the table. She used a lawyer in Wisconsin. The deed was held under her maiden name. Evelyn looked at Dominic. Your mother did not trust them? No. Did she tell you why? She said Vivian confused loyalty with ownership. The words remained in the room. Evelyn turned another page. A photograph showed the private clinic where she had awakened. The building looked smaller than she remembered. Gray brick, narrow windows, a row of shrubs near the entrance. She could still smell the antiseptic. She could still feel the tape against her wrist. Dominic saw her hand stop. You do not have to read everything tonight. Yes, I do. You are exhausted. So were they when they signed my name. His face tightened. Evelyn looked back at the photograph. I spent 6 years being afraid of shadows. I want names now. Eli opened a second folder. The clinic director was Dr. Samuel Price. He retired 4 years ago and moved to Arizona. He denied knowing Victor until we showed him the transfers. And then he hired a lawyer. Dominic's voice was flat. That means he remembers. Eli nodded. We also found Leah Moreno. Evelyn looked up so quickly the chair moved beneath her. The nurse. She lives in New Mexico. Is she safe? Yes. Did she remember me? Eli's expression softened. She remembered everything. Evelyn covered her mouth. For 6 years she had wondered whether Leah survived helping her. Some nights the possibility that Vivian found her had felt heavier than the memory of the clinic itself. What did she say? She agreed to give a sworn statement if her family receives protection. Dominic looked at Eli. She will have it. Eli continued. She kept copies of 2 nursing logs because she believed the clinic would destroy the originals. One confirms a viable fetal heartbeat. Another records that no emergency procedure was medically required. Evelyn stared at the papers. Mason had been alive. She had known it in her body even when every person around her tried to replace instinct with authority. Still seeing the truth in ink made her eyes burn. Dominic moved around the table. He stopped beside her but did not touch her. I should have found this. You could not find what your own people were paid to hide. I should have questioned them. Yes. The answer was quiet. It hurt more because she did not soften it. Dominic accepted it. Eli placed another envelope on the table. This came from the original audio file. He connected a small speaker to his phone. Dominic's voice filled the kitchen. Clear. You asked me what happens if Vivian tries to control our child. I am telling you now I will not bring a child into a world where my family controls every lock. If they make me choose, I choose you and the baby. The recording stopped. Evelyn closed her eyes. She had heard only pieces of that sentence in the clinic. I will not bring a child into the world. The family. Choose. The missing words had changed love into rejection. Eli played the edited version. It lasted 7 seconds. I will not bring a child into this world if it threatens the family. Dominic turned off the speaker. The silence afterward felt violent. Evelyn looked at him. You said you would choose us. I meant it. But you did not know you had to. No. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Dominic looked toward the ceiling. Mason had spent the evening sleeping beside 2 paper gliders and a clay fox with one uneven ear. Evelyn lowered her voice. If this becomes public, his life changes. It already changed when they photographed him. That is not what I mean. Dominic waited. People will call him your son, then your heir, then your weakness. They can call him whatever they want. They will treat him according to what they believe. Dominic moved closer to the table. Then I make sure they understand he is not available to them. You cannot control every person in Chicago. No. The answer surprised her. He looked at the photograph of Mason attached to the school file. But I can control what happens inside my house. Evelyn studied him. Can you, Dominic, understood the question? Vivian had arranged his life for years. Victor had managed his legal affairs. Men who claimed loyalty had carried false messages and hidden a living child. Dominic had ruled an organization without realizing how much of his own world belonged to someone else. I am beginning to, he said. Near dawn they reached the DNA report. Evelyn saw the laboratory name and looked at Dominic sharply. You tested him, no? Her voice hardened. Then where did this come from? Eli answered. The clinic retained blood samples under the false admission name. Leah's copy of the log included the sample number. We compared the preserved maternal record and fetal screening material to Dominic's existing medical profile. Evelyn looked between them. You used records stolen from us. We used records that already existed, Eli said. Nothing was taken from Mason. Dominic held her gaze. I told Eli there would be no secret test. The tension in her shoulders loosened slightly. What does it say? Eli slid the page toward her. The language was technical, but the conclusion was not. The probability of paternity exceeded 99%. Evelyn looked at Dominic. He did not reach for the report. He looked at her instead. I did not need it, he said. The chapel will. His eyes changed. You are certain you want him there. I am certain I do not want anyone questioning him while he stands alone in a hallway. He will not be alone. No, he will be with me. Dominic nodded. They remained at the table until the windows turned gray. At 8, Eli drove back to Chicago. At 9, Mason came downstairs wearing his green sweater backward. He looked at the papers. Is that homework? Yes, Evelyn said. For who, all of us? Mason looked at Dominic. Did you finish? Not yet. You should have started earlier. Dominic looked toward Evelyn. She hid a smile behind her coffee. Mason climbed onto a chair. Are we going home today? Evelyn and Dominic exchanged a glance. Not yet, she said. Are we going to the wedding? Dominic's face became still. How do you know about the wedding? Mason reached for an apple. Mom said you were getting married. Evelyn looked down. Mason bit into the apple. Is that why you wear black? No. Do you like the lady? Dominic answered carefully. Her name is Claire. That is not what I asked. Evelyn almost told him to stop. Dominic spoke first. I respect her. Mason chewed. That sounds like grown-up no. Dominic looked at him. It means she is a good person. Do you love her? The kitchen fell quiet. Dominic did not look away from the child. No. Mason frowned. Then why are you marrying her? Dominic sat across from him. Because adults sometimes agree to things for the wrong reasons. Mom says wrong reasons do not become right because adults wear nice clothes. Evelyn looked at the window. Dominic almost smiled. Your mother is correct. Are you still marrying her? Mason took another bite. Does Claire know? Not yet. You should tell her. I will, before she puts on the dress. Dominic nodded. Yes. Mason seemed satisfied. Later that morning, Dominic returned to Chicago with Eli. Evelyn remained at the lake house with Mason and 2 guards she had personally approved. Before leaving, Dominic stood near the front door. Mason sat on the floor, coloring the wings of stay. You are going away, he said, for a few hours. When are you coming back before dinner? Mason looked at the clock, though he could not read the hands accurately. Promise. Dominic paused. Evelyn watched him. Mason's rule remained between them. Do not promise things only because people are scared. I expect to be back before dinner, Dominic said. If I cannot, I will call you myself. Mason considered the answer. That is honest. Dominic put on his coat. Mason returned to coloring. At the door, Evelyn spoke quietly. Come back. Dominic looked at her. She had not said please. She had not said for Mason. Still, he heard both. I will. Claire Mercer was waiting in the Vale Estate Library when Dominic arrived. She wore cream trousers and a dark blue blouse. Her engagement ring rested on her left hand. A leather wedding planner sat unopened beside her. Vivian had told her Dominic needed to discuss final security arrangements. Claire looked at Eli, then at the locked door. This does not feel like seating arrangements. No, Dominic said. She studied his face. Is there another woman? Yes. Claire inhaled slowly. Dominic placed the forged separation papers on the desk. My wife. Claire looked at him. You told me she left you. That is what I believed. You said the marriage ended. It did not. Her gaze moved to the papers. She did not touch them. Is she alive? Yes. Does Vivian know? She has always known. The room changed. Claire sat down. Dominic gave her the medical records, the transfer documents, and the first part of Leah's statement. He did not rush her. Claire read in silence. Her expression remained controlled until she reached the sentence stating there was no surviving child of the marriage. She looked up. There is a child. Yes, a boy, yes. How old? 6. Claire closed the folder. Is he yours, yes? She leaned back. For several seconds, the only sound came from workers moving chairs outside the library. My father knew about this. He knew the legal process was being accelerated. I do not know whether he knew why. Our attorney spoke with Victor before the separation date. Yes. Claire looked toward the door. My father said you were free. He said Evelyn had chosen another life. So did Vivian. Claire removed the engagement ring. She placed it on the desk. Why are you telling me now instead of canceling the ceremony? Because Vivian believes the wedding proves she still controls the room. And you want the room full? Yes. Claire stood. You are asking me to walk down an aisle for a marriage that cannot happen. I am asking nothing. That is not true. Dominic accepted the accusation. Claire crossed to the window. White flowers covered the chapel steps. My whole life men have described arrangements as choices after making sure there was only one answer. Dominic said nothing. She looked back at him. If I walk into that chapel, I do it for myself. Yes. I decide when the veil comes off. Yes. And no one treats me like the foolish bride who failed to notice another woman. You are not responsible for their crime. Claire's eyes hardened. Neither was she. No. Claire picked up the folder. I want copies. Eli placed a second envelope beside her. They are already prepared. Claire looked at him. You assumed I would agree. No, Eli said. I assumed you would want proof no one could take from you. She held the envelope against her side. Does Evelyn know I am helping? Not yet, Dominic said. Tell her before Sunday. I will. Claire walked to the door, then stopped. Dominic, he looked at her. Do you love your wife? The question did not require thought. Yes. Claire opened the door. Then do not make her stand in that chapel while you pretend this is only about justice. She left. Dominic returned to the lake house before dinner. Mason was waiting near the window. When the car appeared beyond the gate, he ran outside before Evelyn could stop him. Dominic stepped from the vehicle. Mason held up stay. You came back. I said I would. You said you expected to. I did. Mason handed him the glider. Throw it. Dominic did. The paper plane rose over the wet lawn and turned toward the lake. Mason ran after it. Evelyn stood on the porch. Dominic walked toward her. Claire knows. How did she react? She removed the ring. Did you ask her to continue the ceremony? No, will she? Yes. Evelyn's expression tightened. She agreed she chose. The distinction mattered. Does she know about Mason? Yes. Does she believe you? She believes the documents. Evelyn looked toward the trees. I do not want her humiliated, neither does she. Dominic stopped beside the porch rail. She asked for copies. She intends to confront her father after the ceremony. Evelyn studied him. She is braver than they expected. Yes. Mason returned carrying stay. It almost touched the lake. Dominic took the glider. You need a higher angle. Mason looked at Evelyn. Can Dom come to my room for what planning? Dominic's eyebrows lifted. Planning what? Mason lowered his voice. Wedding stopping. Evelyn stared at him. How much did you hear enough? Mason. You said bad people lied. Dom said he is not marrying Claire. That means someone has to stop the wedding. Dominic crouched. This is an adult problem. Adults made it. That does not make it yours. Mason hugged the glider to his chest. Is Mom going? Evelyn answered. Yes. Then I am going. No. He looked at her. You said we do not run anymore. She closed her eyes. That does not mean you walk into danger. Will there be bad people? Yes. Will Dom be there? Yes. Will Eli? Yes. Will you? Yes. Mason thought for several seconds. Then I will be scared with everyone. Dominic looked at Evelyn. She saw the question in his face. Not permission. Trust. She knelt in front of Mason. You stay beside me, I will. If I say we leave, we leave. Even before cake, there may not be cake. That is a badly planned wedding. Dominic looked away to hide a smile. Sunday arrived clear and cold. By noon, the Vale estate looked like a palace built to impress people who trusted nothing. White orchids climbed the chapel columns. Gold chairs formed precise rows beneath painted saints. Crystal lights turned the winter sun into shards across the marble floor. Men in dark suits stood near every entrance. Women carried diamonds heavy enough to announce alliances. Politicians arrived through the front drive. Businessmen used the side entrance. Family elders entered through private doors and looked at one another with the careful politeness of people who remembered every insult. Vivian moved through the estate in silver silk. She inspected flowers, corrected ushers, and spoke to security men who no longer reported to her. She did not notice the change. Victor remained near the chapel office, answering calls and watching the driveway. Eli's men had already sealed the service exits. Claire dressed upstairs. Her gown was ivory, simple and severe. A stylist fastened the veil while Claire stared at herself in the mirror. Her mother stood behind her. You look beautiful. Claire touched the empty place on her left hand. She had put the ring back on for the ceremony. Only for the ceremony. Her father entered without knocking. Dominic requested changes to security. I heard. Vivian says there may be trouble. There has been trouble for 6 years. He looked at her reflection. What does that mean? Claire stood. It means you should sit in the front row and listen carefully. At 4:30, Evelyn arrived through the north gate with Mason and Eli. She wore a dark green dress that fell below her knees. No diamonds, no Vale family jewelry, nothing that could be mistaken for a claim placed upon her. Mason wore a navy jacket, gray trousers, and shoes he had complained about for 20 minutes. Bluebird rested inside his pocket. Stay remained in his hand. The estate rose beyond the trees. Mason looked through the car window. Dom lives here, yes, Evelyn said. It is too big. Yes. Does he know where all the bathrooms are? Eli answered from the front seat. Probably not. Mason looked concerned. That is dangerous. The car stopped near a private entrance. Dominic waited beneath the stone arch. He wore a black tuxedo. When he saw Evelyn, every sound around him seemed to recede. She stepped from the car. For one moment they looked like the people they might have been if no one had broken the years between them. Then Mason climbed out. Dominic crouched to straighten the boy's collar. Mason pushed his hand away. I can do it. Dominic lowered his hand. Of course. Mason tried once, failed, then looked at him. You can help now. Dominic fixed the collar. Better Mason nodded. Less funeral. Evelyn looked at Dominic. He knows only what we agreed. Dominic stood. So does everyone protecting him. Where will he stay with Eli near the rear doors until the chapel is secured? Mason frowned. I stay with Mom. Evelyn took his hand. He stays with me. Dominic nodded. He had expected nothing else. The organ began inside. Eli touched the communication piece near his ear. Victor is in the chapel. Vivian is seated. All principal guests are inside. Dominic looked at Evelyn. You do not have to do this. Yes, I do. For yourself, for Mason. Dominic waited. And for myself, she said. He inclined his head. Then he entered through the side corridor. At 5, Dominic stood at the altar. The chapel glowed white and gold. Vivian sat in the front row. Victor stood near the side wall. Claire's father looked toward the doors with impatience. Dominic looked at no one. The priest opened his book. Music rose. Claire appeared at the far end of the aisle. She walked alone. Her father had expected to escort her. She had refused. The veil covered her face, but Dominic could see her eyes. She did not look like a bride. She looked like a witness. When she reached the altar, the priest began. Dominic Vale and Claire Mercer have come before family, faith, and community to join their lives. Claire's gaze remained on Dominic. The priest turned a page. Before he could continue, the rear chapel doors opened. The music stopped. Every head turned. Evelyn stood in the doorway holding Mason's hand. Whispers moved through the room. Her name traveled from pew to pew. Evelyn, she is alive, the boy. Vivian's face lost color. Victor shifted toward the side corridor. Eli stepped into his path. Mason looked at the flowers, the armed men, and the rows of strangers. Then he saw Dominic. He released Evelyn's hand. "Mason," she whispered. He walked into the aisle. The paper glider swung from his fingers. Dominic stepped down from the altar. Mason stopped in front of him and looked up. "Papa." The word entered the chapel and changed every face. Claire turned toward Dominic. Vivian's fingers tightened against the pew. Dominic's hand began to tremble. Mason frowned. "You said you would not disappear again." Dominic looked at Evelyn. "What did you tell him?" "Only what he deserved to know." Vivian stood. "This ceremony will continue." Dominic did not look at her. Mason glanced at Claire's gown. "Are you marrying her even though Mom is still your wife?" The room erupted. Claire removed one glove. "What does he mean?" Dominic looked at Evelyn. She stood alone in the aisle, but she no longer looked like a woman preparing to run. Dominic knelt in front of Mason. "Who told you to call me Papa?" Mason held stay against his chest. "You did. I never said that, not with words." Mason touched Dominic's sleeve. "You said it when you came for me." Dominic closed his eyes. When he stood, the groom was gone. He turned toward the chapel. "There will be no wedding today." Vivian stepped into the aisle. "Dominic, think carefully." He faced her. "I have done nothing else for 3 days." Claire lifted her veil. She turned toward the guests. "I was told Dominic was legally free to marry." Vivian's voice sharpened. "He is." "No," Claire said. "He is not." Murmurs spread through the room. Dominic walked back toward Evelyn. He did not take her hand. He stood beside her. "This is Evelyn Vale," he said. "My wife." Victor spoke from near the wall. "She abandoned you." Dominic looked at him. "You forged her separation." Victor's face remained controlled. "That is an accusation made under emotional distress." Eli closed the chapel doors. Dominic's voice never rose. 6 years ago, Evelyn was taken to a private clinic after a staged car crash. She was drugged. She was shown false documents bearing my signature. She was told I had authorized the end of her pregnancy. Gasps moved through the guests. Vivian shook her head. "This is grief manipulating memory." Evelyn stepped forward. I remember the restraint around my wrist. The room quieted. I remember hearing my son's heartbeat while a nurse whispered that he was healthy. I remember Victor Hale standing outside the door and saying the problem had to be finished before Dominic returned. Victor looked toward the exit. Eli remained there. Dominic signaled to the technician near the chapel screen. The wedding tribute display turned on. Leah Moreno appeared by secure video. Her face was older than Evelyn remembered. Her voice shook, but it did not break. She gave her name, her former position, and the date Evelyn had been admitted. She described the viable fetal heartbeat. She described the lack of medical necessity. She described Vivian's private visit and Victor's instructions. Evelyn watched the woman who had saved her. Leah looked into the camera. "I believed Mrs. Vale and her baby would die if I did nothing." The screen changed. The original consent form appeared beside samples of Evelyn's real signature. The differences were visible. Then came the transfer records, the clinic payments, the false court stamp, the separation statement claiming no child had survived. Claire's father stood. "This evidence has not been verified." Claire turned toward him. "Our attorney's name appears on 3 calls with Victor before the false filing date." His face changed. Claire continued. "You knew the process was irregular. I knew it was private. You chose not to ask why." He sat down. The original audio played. Dominic's voice filled the chapel. "If they make me choose, I choose you and the baby." Then the edited version played. "I will not bring a child into this world if it threatens the family." No one moved. Dominic looked at Vivian. "You gave me the second recording. I gave you what she said she wanted." Evelyn faced her. You never asked what I wanted. Vivian looked at the guests. This woman disappeared for 6 years. She arrives with a child and a story because Dominic is about to secure the strongest alliance this family has had in decades. Dominic signaled again. The DNA report appeared on the screen. His voice was calm. Mason is my son. Mason tightened his grip on Evelyn's hand. Victor laughed once. A laboratory report can be purchased. Dominic turned toward him. So can a clinic. So can a signature. So can a driver. You taught us that. Eli placed a phone on the chapel lectern. The captured attacker's recorded voice played. Mrs. Vale said the boy had to be gone before Sunday. Vivian's composure cracked. Only slightly, but everyone saw it. Dominic stepped toward her. You knew Mason lived. I knew there was a possibility. You ordered men to take him. I ordered a threat contained. Evelyn moved between Vivian and Mason. He is a child. Vivian looked at her. He is Dominic Vale's son. His name is Mason. He carries this family's blood. He carries crayons in his pockets and refuses to eat peas. That is what he carries. A few guests lowered their eyes. Vivian's voice sharpened. You do not understand what his existence changes. Evelyn held her ground. I understand exactly what you feared. You could control Dominic while he believed he had nothing left to protect. Vivian looked toward Dominic. I preserved your position. You preserved your access to it. You would have surrendered everything for her. Dominic stepped beside Evelyn. I would have chosen my wife and son. You were not capable of making that choice. You made sure I never had it. Vivian's control finally broke. A wife can be replaced. A bloodline cannot. The chapel fell silent. Mason looked up at Evelyn. She placed one hand against the back of his head. Dominic's face became still. And that he said is why you will never stand near either of them again. Claire removed her veil. She folded it once and placed it on the empty front pew. Then she removed Dominic's ring from her finger. She set it beside the veil. You did not arrange a marriage, she said to Vivian. You arranged another burial. Vivian looked around the chapel for support. No one moved. Power left the room without making a sound. Victor tried the side door. Eli caught his wrist. 2 investigators entered through the rear corridor with uniformed officers behind them. Victor's face changed for the first time. Dominic had not trusted the family to police itself. Copies of every document had already left the estate. Victor was taken through the side aisle. Vivian remained standing. An investigator approached her. She looked at Dominic. You would destroy this family for them. Dominic glanced at Mason. No. He looked back at her. I am ending what you built around it. Evelyn felt Mason pull gently on her hand. Can we leave, yes? Dominic faced the guests. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not claim Evelyn as something restored to him. He did not lift Mason before the room like an heir. He simply said, We are leaving. They walked through the side garden. Cold air met them beyond the chapel doors. White orchids climbed the stone wall. The noise inside became distant, reduced to voices movement and the beginning of consequences. Mason stopped beneath the bare branches of an old tree. He looked at Dominic. Why did you tell everyone I am your son? Dominic looked at Evelyn. She nodded. He lowered himself until he was eye level with Mason. Because it is true. Mason stared at him. Like real Dominic's voice became unsteady. Real. Mason looked at Evelyn. Did you know tears filled her eyes? Yes, sweetheart. Why did you not tell me Evelyn crouched beside him? Because I was scared. Of Papa. She looked at Dominic. Of the people around him. And sometimes of the man he had become. Dominic did not defend himself. She had reasons. Mason looked back at him. Did you know about me? No. Did you look for me? Dominic swallowed. I looked for your mother. I believed lies when I should have kept looking. Mason thought about the answer with a seriousness no child should have needed. Then he stepped closer. Can I still call you Dom? Dominic's eyes filled. You can call me anything you want. Mason touched the front of his jacket. Can I call you Papa? Sometimes. Dominic closed his eyes for 1 second. Whenever you want. Mason wrapped his arms around Dominic's neck. Dominic held him carefully. You still have to follow the rules, Mason whispered. Everyone. Evelyn watched them beneath the winter sky. Behind the chapel walls, a family built on control was beginning to collapse. In front of her, Dominic held his son as if learning the weight of something he had no right to drop. Mason pulled back. "Papa, yes, I am hungry." Dominic looked at Evelyn. For the first time that day, she almost smiled. They left the estate together. They returned to the lake house after dark. Mason fell asleep in the back seat with his head against Evelyn's shoulder. One hand remained closed around Dominic's cuff, as if even in sleep he needed proof that the man beside him had not disappeared. Dominic carried him upstairs. This time he did not hesitate at the bedroom door. He placed Mason beneath the blanket, set Bluebird on the dresser, and left the hallway light on. When Dominic returned downstairs, Evelyn stood on the back porch facing the lake. The water was black beneath the winter sky. Light from the kitchen stretched across the boards behind her. Dominic stopped several feet away. "You should rest. So should you." "I will." She looked at him. "No. You will stand by a window until morning." He did not deny it. For a while, neither of them spoke. The estate, the chapel, and Vivian's voice felt distant now. Yet nothing had truly ended. Documents would be examined. Statements would be taken. Lawyers would argue over words that had already cost them years. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. "I do not know how to trust you." Dominic looked toward the lake. "I know. I loved you while I was running from you." His hand tightened against the porch rail. "That was the worst part," she said. "Every time I changed Mason's name on a school form, every time I checked a window before sleeping, I still remembered the man who painted clouds above his crib." Dominic lowered his head. "I hated you because it was easier than what believing I had failed you." She turned toward him. "You believed them?" "Yes." "You signed the separation?" "Yes." "You stopped looking?" The last answer took longer. "Yes." He offered no defense. Evelyn watched him stand beneath the porch light without armor, excuses, or commands. What happens to Mason now? "No title. They will call him your heir. Then I will teach him to answer to his name first. They will try to use him. They will not reach him through me." Evelyn's expression hardened. "Not through either of us." Dominic corrected himself immediately. "Not without our permission." The difference was small. It mattered. She looked back at the water. "I will not move into the estate. I will not ask you to. I choose where Mason lives. Yes, I approve his security. Yes, and you do not arrive whenever you want because you are his father." Dominic nodded. "You set the days." Evelyn studied him, waiting for resistance. None came. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Both of them looked toward the house. Mason appeared at the porch door wearing one sock and dragging his blanket. "You left." Evelyn opened the door. "We are right here." Mason stepped outside and looked at Dominic. "You said you would be here." "I am. That counts." He walked between them and lifted his arms. Dominic looked at Evelyn. She nodded. He picked Mason up. The child rested his head against Dominic's shoulder. "Papa," the word still changed Dominic's breathing. "Yes." "Do you live with us now?" Dominic answered carefully. "No." Mason frowned. "Why?" "Because your mother and I need time." "Are you in trouble?" "Yes." Evelyn almost smiled. Mason looked at her. "Is it big trouble, very big? Can he fix it?" Dominic held him closer. "I can try." Mason yawned. "Trying is almost disappearing language. Then I will show you." That answer satisfied him. 3 months passed. Dominic did not ask Evelyn to return to the Vale estate. He found a secure brick house near Mason's school and gave Evelyn every key. The deed carried her name alone. She chose the guards. She changed 2 of them in the first week. Dominic made no objection. He arrived every Tuesday and Saturday. Sometimes he came in a black car. Sometimes he drove himself. He was never late without calling. On the first Saturday, Mason waited by the window for 40 minutes before Dominic arrived. A meeting had trapped him downtown. Dominic entered carrying no gifts. I said 10. "It is 10:40. "I know. You broke the rule." "Yes." Mason crossed his arms. "What happens now, I apologize. Then I do better." Mason considered this. "Also pancakes." Dominic removed his coat. 3 good ones. No smoke. By the 5th Saturday, he could make 4. Dominic learned that Mason hated peas but liked green beans. He learned that thunderstorms were acceptable if the hallway lights stayed on. He learned that a child could ask 12 questions during a 5-minute drive and expect everyone to be answered. He attended counseling with Evelyn. The first sessions were quiet. Dominic spoke as if every sentence might be used against him. Evelyn answered with careful facts and no mercy. He kept returning. Vivian and Victor were charged with conspiracy, medical fraud, attempted abduction, and falsification of legal records. The clinic was placed under investigation. Leah Moreno received protection and agreed to testify. Claire gave investigators copies of her family attorney's communication with Victor. She ended the Mercer alliance publicly and left Chicago before spring. The false separation documents were voided. Legally, Dominic and Evelyn remained married. Neither of them allowed the document to decide what came next. One Tuesday afternoon, they returned to Harbor Street. The hallway looked exactly as it had before, paper stars turned beneath the vents. Clay animals leaned across crowded shelves. Paint marked the floor in bright, uneven stains. Mason ran ahead, carrying Bluebird. Dominic walked beside Evelyn without touching her. His security remained outside. Mason launched the glider. It rose, circled once, and landed against Dominic's shoe. He bent to pick it up. "Papa." Dominic froze. Mason pointed at his face. "Weather break?" Dominic looked at Evelyn. The storm had not vanished completely. Perhaps it never would. He crouched beside Mason and smiled. Better Mason inspected him. Less villain. That is progress. Medium progress. Dominic handed him the glider. Mason ran toward the studio. Evelyn and Dominic remained in the hallway. Dominic extended his hand. He did not reach for her. He only waited. For 6 years, Evelyn had survived by leaving before anyone could remove the choice. The exit stood open behind her. Dominic made no demand. She placed her hand in his. At the end of the hallway, Mason turned. "Are you coming?" Dominic looked at Evelyn. She did not let go. Together they walked toward their son.